Dear human, dear soul, I welcome you to my podcast series, Conversations with the Universe. Since a near-death experience, I have the gift to communicate with subtle levels of the cosmos. The knowledge from these for us invisible forms of energy I capture in my books, and it is now a great pleasure for me to share this knowledge, these conversations, with you as a supplement to the books. Please excuse me if the terms and articulations are not perfect. Our mother tongue is German, but we try to translate it to the best of our abilities. Thank you. Dear King Salomon, please begin to talk about the things you want to pass on to the people about your experience with regard to the subject of war and battle and their resulting resonances. What do they have to know concerning the subject?
First of all, Sylvia, you should distinguish between war and battle. Many goals will be reached through battle in the jungle of being. As long as this happens without casualties or even death, fighting is a human tool in order to overcome blockades. But war perverts the state of fighting. People die, animals die, nature suffers, all without a goal.
Okay, so you mean that when a person fights a little to overcome blockages, then that is quite justified, as long as he doesn't harm anybody. And war is the perversion of this trait of humankind. But you say without a goal, whereas many a war actually does have the goal to overcome blockages, conquer countries, get hold of resources, and so on. But please continue.
You wish to explore through your question how the cosmos is reacting to this state of being, right?
Yes.
Through fighting to overcome blockades imposed by others for the goal of the common good, the cosmic resonances act in an accelerating fashion upon the impulse givers. But those who fight for their own good and advantage will not receive such supporting energies from the cosmos. Through an act of war, souls will be contaminated and they must compensate for this resonance. Through much killing and maiming of people, who after all are all equipped with a soul, resonances will be raised that contaminate their souls in far too high a degree.
This is a good opportunity to ask again, what will happen then? Friend of the Indians distinguishes between those that serve in a war and those that give the orders. Who, in his sort of war that we experienced under Hitler, for example, will be contaminated? Will it be the soldiers that acted in the name of this person, or is it just his one person from whom the whole idea originated?
This is very difficult for me to answer, because I'm not as deeply initiated into the cosmic laws as, for instance, Friend of the Indians. If you asked him, you would get a better answer. In my observation, however, it is the leader who will be most contaminated through giving the order, yet his followers will also be contaminated, albeit to a lesser degree.
Okay, I will talk about this in more depth some other time. What do you think is the reason for fighting and the escalation into war? Why do people create situations in which they have to fight in the first place?
This is a very intense question, Sylvia. A human being knows very well that he can avoid much suffering through communication, but he does not communicate.
Yes, I can't help but noticing that myself. Why is this so? Is this a defect or is it a result of our upbringing?
Often it's a result of our upbringing, but some people cannot feel another being, and hence does not seek to communicate with them.
You wish to name communication as the key through which one can avoid much suffering. But I cannot help noticing that, for instance, in the world of business, you cannot talk to some people. It is useless. They have a certain image or a certain imagination, and you cannot convince them that this can be or could be changed. When there is no willingness, there is no chance.
Yes, this is correct. But it mostly pertains to very unconscious people. You yourself have noticed that it is much easier to communicate with souls that have more awareness, isn't it?
Yes.
A soul with little awareness may also have very little information. It does not ask.
You mean it does not question either? So the people who are superficial, they are easily satisfied with certain facts, and they will not be moved by new facts.
Yes, because their unconsciousness is like a veil that covers their beliefs and protects them at the same time.
Okay, so the cause, as usual, is unawareness.
Exactly.
What can you do?
Just carry on. You cannot convert or convince anybody. You will take the step to seek a connection and avoid giving energy to those types of connections.
Well, I have developed the habit to tell those people what I really think.
You can do that, but you will not change their opinion.
Yes, unfortunately. I know. But that is something that my ego needs. But we digress. Okay, so we have seen that one main reason for fighting and also for battle is a lack of communication. But it can also be that it is impossible to communicate when you are dealing with unconscious souls. To sum up, we are on the planet where you find an extreme amount of unconscious people and unconscious souls. So it would follow logically that there will always be fighting and battle, and that it must be so forever.
Yes.
As part of the jungle.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Then please tell me in how far the resonances from these actions have a certain power or heaviness or intensity, maybe that is the better word, for these souls, leaving aside fighting without casualties.
Yes, because this indeed has fewer negative resonances. It is not a crime to enter respectfully into conflict.
Yes, I understand. So please speak. What exactly is in store for these souls that act warlike without any regard for casualties?
Through the act of disrespecting the free will of other people, the resonances of connection to these people you are harming will be much stronger after the death of your body.
Ah, now it starts to get interesting.
Through the negative impulses into the cosmos and, specifically, into the souls of those other people, the soul who has given these impulses will leave the body in a very weak state.
Really? I would have thought that such a blown-up ego would have collected enormous quantities of power in the body.
Yes, but not in the soul.
Understand. Please continue.
Once outside the body, this weak soul will feel the desperate energy of those souls whose free will it has broken. And you cannot imagine how that feels.
Oh my God. But I can imagine that it is that which the people call purgatory. You know, the last judgment. I'm sorry, I don't know. I'm not known with these Bible things. The last judgment. Then, when you will be judged, please explain that this is not really an external power that judges.
Absolutely. There is no external power that passes judgment. It is the stunned soul energy of this being that now exists without the ego. The human being and its ego were so strong they could cause this amount of harm that their soul became unable to give them enough power to expand, unfold, to feel loving impulses or even positive impulses. It's like a flower that you forget to water. It will almost dry out.
Okay. So it has at least no or less cosmic energy. And these souls now enter the vast cosmic field with this weak energy level. How must I imagine that? What does the soul feel then? What does it see? What does it perceive?
I do not know all the details, but I assume that a very weak soul naturally feels very dark and lonely. It cannot perceive all the energies around it because its perception has been dimmed by its own contamination.
Interesting. And how does it go on for such a soul?
Through the many harmful impulses that it has given during its lifetime, it will reflect all of these impulses, each and every one of them.
Every one of them? So what will Hitler have to do since he has 1 million deaths on his conscience?
Well, yes, every one of them. Because every single soul that suffered such hardship because he has exercised his free will over them, he will have to contemplate them and lovingly bring them back into balance.
Oh my God. And how do this contemplation and this balancing come to pass? The soul is in this state of relatively dimmed perception, is lonely, feels badly, weak, probably cannot even move really. What happens now? Does the soul kind of remember?
It is a kind of remembering. It feels the resonance of each desperate soul.
Oh my God, so it feels the connection to these souls.
Absolutely.
And then, does it have a possibility to apologize through realization, these connections, or make amends in any way?
No. This has to happen through action, but not through a single impulse sent out of the weakness of this soul. That is not possible at all. How will you be able to balance several souls at the same time if you yourself have no more energy?
Yes, that makes sense. But how does it go on for such a soul?
Naturally, the details vary from case to case, but generally the path is the same. The souls will be purified through the realization and the experience of the connection that this soul had with each and every one of them and still has, until these connections have been brought into balance. This means that the experience and resulting awareness of the ramifications of your own actions alone will serve to change your perception. And then an impetus will grow in the soul that will be strong enough to move it, and this movement is the key to the chance for balance. It wants to balance, and so in this process it will move into the direction that enables this balance. Without knowing exactly why, it will be brought to a level where it can create balance.
And does that happen in the spiritual worlds?
No.
So it will have to incarnate again?
Exactly, you say it. But in order to do this, you need a certain amount of preparation. So to begin with, I will name the level of this preparation.
So what does this preparation look like?
A soul wanting to reincarnate will first have to state its intention very clearly. All souls have to do this through their own free will and their own deeply felt impulse. Only then will the energy be strong enough to reincarnate. So, this soul, after it has made this decision, is now in a state of preparation, has to find the appropriate parents.
And how does this happen?
Quite simply. For as long as there are no parents with appropriate resonances, the soul cannot incarnate. But at the very moment that there are two matching resonances, the soul is being pulled into this body as through a vortex.
That means on the one hand you need the willingness to do so, but on the other hand the rest of this happens like in a vortex. So you have to be ready to be pulled. That is quite a challenge, of course.
Yes, it is. But if your intention is strong enough, then this pull of the energy of the cosmos is just a way to fulfill your wish.
Yes, that's true. I would like to know what kind of parental resonance is needed for such a soul. That would be very interesting for me to know. What potential must the parents bring to it, to a soul that has murdered tons of humans?
That is a difficult question. Because even here, there are so many levels that come into play. But these parents should most of all be able to enable the soul that is intent on creating balance to realize its potential for love.
And how can they do that?
Through the power of love, Sylvia.
You mean that this being would have to come to a very, very, very loving couple?
Oh, yes.
Okay, because that would mean that through the great love that the soul then suddenly receives, that it would also be willing to pass on this love.
Yes, it is pretty much as you have just described it. Through the strong love energy of these parent souls, the soul will find the power to love in a way that it had not been able to do before. At the same time, it will strengthen through this power of love and so become stronger in and of itself. There, where the love energy had always been present but had become stunned. So it's like a hospital of soul energy, if you want. Then, in the course of the years, this love will blossom further and the impulse to create balance remains. Such souls will then usually want to pass on the love that they experienced during their childhood.
And then?
Mostly they serve. They help many, many sick people and often also very poor people.
At all, and such people that carry so much love. I mean, the parents now, are they often poor or are they likely to be rich? Can you pinpoint this other material basics?
No.
It does not have anything to do with this, right?
Right.
I'm only asking because I have experienced in most cases that other people who have grown up in a rather wealthy environment, that they have often become very egoistical and that this in turn could cause problems. I mean that the soul may then lose its energy again.
Yes. And no. When the soul has stated its intention to help, clearly, in and out of itself, then it will find exactly the right parents that will provide the right platform, regardless of whether they are more or less wealthy, because that does not matter.
Yes, that makes sense. And then the soul has the possibility to help, to create balance and so forth. And then, what does that mean for this soul? I mean, is it possible, for instance, taking the extreme case of Hitler again, that this soul can create balance within just one life?
Yes.
What? Really?
Through many, 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 very many, very intensely loving impulses, this is possible. Believe it or not. The intention and the intensity of the impulses that the soul gives continually throughout its life are the key factor. Not the time is important, but the energy.
And when this soul has done this a whole life long, then maybe it will feel the moment of balance even during that lifetime.
Yes, that can be.
Wow.
But this is not relevant. The soul energy is getting stronger and it can get back into balance. That means that it will lose less energy when it leaves the body and it will find itself on a different level than at the last excarnation.
With that you mean when it leaves the body?
Exactly.
Let's recap briefly for those who still haven't understood. With different levels, you do not mean another spiritual level, but a different type of perception, right?
Yes. It's good that you wish to clarify this once more, because the soul, purified, expanded, wider, stronger, and freer, now perceives what it could not before. But it's still in the same place, which is the cosmos.
Well, it is very hard to understand for the people, because if you say now that this is the place, is the cosmos, we think in terms of space, and then maybe the people will ask, so is the soul still in the vicinity of the body, or where exactly is it? And is it an orb, or what is it? Can you say something about that?
No. That would go beyond the scope of this conversation.
Yes.
The souls dwell in the cosmic energy, but what they are in terms of form, state of being, or energy is really a rather deep question and would fill another book.
Yes, and I will track this as well. I think that was very interesting to look at this, or it is interesting to look at this subject. Thank you for that. Let's imagine that somebody reincarnates and lives his entire life in the impulse to give love, to create balance, and so on and so forth, without really knowing exactly why it is so, except that something in him continually seeks balance. What happens in this case with the victims? Does it help the victims, or how does it energetically work?
That is a very important question, Sylvia. Thank you for asking. When the souls are flung from the body through such actions, they find themselves at the first level, but they stay in connection with the perpetrator of this action. They are often in a state of shock that you also know as a human being. This means that the souls of the victims as well as the souls of the perpetrators are on the first level, but they do not actually meet each other in the sense that you conceive of this. They perceive each other through emotions without really being able to see each other. This is very hard to describe, but it is exclusively the connection that they perceive. When the perpetrating soul has reincarnated into the body and there rediscovered and expanded his capacity for love, this process will be perceived also by the other victim souls, and it will accelerate them.
I can imagine this like a web that connects them all, so that when he who had pulled down the souls to use this image finally ascends, then the others ascend with him.
Exactly.
Although the use of the word ascend is again rather confusing and may create the wrong image. I mean, accelerate, okay?
Absolutely. It's exactly so.
But then those souls are dependent on him the entire life. I mean, how can it be that they are not just propelled from the body and then find themselves in a state of shock, but that then they are also still so connected with this soul that they are dependent on its purification? That is crazy.
It's not crazy, but it is a spiritual law, dear Sylvia. This process, these souls are still connected with the perpetrator soul without themselves being able to decide to disconnect. The cosmic energy moves the fields.
So not one of these souls can accelerate this through the power of their own free will?
No one.
Godless. So when this soul now needs aeons to purify, then they will need aeons as well?
Yes. After all, energy works within the parameters of action and reaction. The souls who are tethered to the other soul through this experience need the impulse of forgiveness. And they can only experience that when the impulse giver expands his love energy. Until then, they are continuously in a state of shock. Do you understand? They are unable to act for themselves. Their energy is bound to this state.
So it's the shock, actually,
Yes.
that is the result of the connection, and the shock makes them not moving. But I still find that crazy. I'm sorry. I mean, that I find it unbelievable how much responsibility people have and don't even know about it. And that goes for everybody who killed himself by a suicide bomb, for everyone that harms another soul. No matter whether it is an aeroplane that you fly into a mountain with 140 souls on board, or whatever, all these people, these souls are then tethered to the purification of this one soul. I would not have thought that's possible. I would thought that they would be able to move away from the state of being on their own accord.
Well, they have the possibility, but they do not have the energy. It's the propulsion from their body that leads to this state of attachment.
Oh dear, dear, dear. Okay, on the other hand, I do not wish to be this perpetrating soul. Imagine how that feels, because it keenly feels this misery, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
How have you come to know all these things?
I know this through observing the souls from my perspective.
And how can you see this? Do you see these fields that are tethered to each other, as it were?
Yes. The fields of energy that consist of several souls are connected to each other, but they emit a relatively dark light.
How can you emit a dark light? Doesn't dark light simply mean that you haven't got a lot of light?
Yes, but you know what I mean. They all seem very weak.
Is there no feeling of anger in these victim souls?
No.
Really? I mean, from a human perspective, it would be understandable if they were furious.
No. Fury is not a cosmic energy. It is human energy.
Understand. Okay, thank you. But it could be that, for instance, if I ask Friend of the Indians or somebody else like that they could give me some more informations on this subject, right? Friend of the Indians did say that you could help these souls gather energy through sending them prayers and love. And from that, it would follow that they could gain energy, enough energy, to disconnect. Wouldn't they?
Yes, absolutely. You should really ask more questions about that when you begin your book about the spiritual worlds. I can only tell you this from my perspective, and I have not yet seen a soul that was able to move away from this energy field of connection on its own accord. All of them were connected to the perpetrator until he had created perfect balance. The fields only moved as a unity, and only as a unity. There were no individual elements. But perhaps my perception is limited in this case. Therefore, please do ask other regarding this. Thank you.
Okay, yes, I will. Another subject that I would be interested in right now is I write, or rather I let you write through me every morning. What happens in the time between our connection? Are you also in contact with other beings, or how do you perceive the time in between our communication?
My activity on this plane of being here is different from what you can imagine. When you contact me, you communicate with my consciousness that is there continuously and therefore available to convey information to you. But at the same time, I can be contacted by other beings.
Do you know, this makes me think of an image. In human technology, we have the cloud. In the cloud, we store information, and everyone who has received permission has access to these data. But the data are always there. Yet sometimes, for instance, when I'm traveling, I can't access the cloud because I haven't got the right tools, for instance, my laptop or smartphone. Is that a bit like this?
Yes, Sylvia, that is a funny example. But it seems somewhat similar. If you are looking for an image in your human sphere that you can easily understand.
Okay, but still, what about the time in between? That which I experience as time, let us say in our case about 24 hours. What are you doing at that time?
I am.
Okay, but you also have free will. For example, you can help and assist throughout the Deus.
Yes. But these are all things that happen parallel to each other outside of space and time. If you call me, you will receive access my knowledge, and I myself exist in the cosmos.
I understand. That means you could almost say you can be in many places at once. We can tap into your consciousness, but you can also direct your consciousness in a particular direction in order to be active there.
Yes, absolutely. Now you've got it.
Okay, then you do not experience time, right?
Right.
But there is a linear course of events, isn't it? I have asked you certain things yesterday, and today I'm asking you something else. And even if you do not know either yesterday or today, it is a linear event for you as well.
It is less linear than you know, but yes, somewhat linear.
So then there's something like time.
If you want to say it. But I say no.
Okay, I will never understand that. Okay, this is where my understanding of time actually ends. Just as I cannot imagine the cosmos without borders, I cannot imagine all that without time. Because even if you do not have time as such, our interaction is still an event in time. So I guess I will now stop asking about this. Maybe my physical understanding with regard of these things will change eventually, so that I can ask the question differently. But now, here and now, I cannot. Thank you very much for this. In order to finish this chapter, is there anything else that you would like to add to the subject of war?
No.
Maybe you have a final tip.
Oh, yes.
Please speak.
You can learn much through the contemplation of the other. If their eyes open slowly, they open on a soul that is slightly more aware. Pay attention to their regard. If the eyes open faster, the physical impulse is stronger. Listening to these impulses and their attention to them and their words, then you will know whether you can communicate with them or not. If you cannot, then remain in readiness to choose your confrontation powerfully and respectfully and seek to find a solution. But the appeal remains to find as many solutions as possible without confrontation. Fewer confrontations also mean smaller risk to your souls.
Wow. Fewer confrontations also means smaller risk to your souls. You have put this beautifully. This is a very nice final statement for this chapter. Would you like to say anything else?
No.
Then I thank you very much and see you later. Thank you, love.
Thank you, Sylvia. Love.